It's the afternoon of December 30th, 1903. You're standing on Randolph Street in Chicago, bundled against the cold, watching a stream of families pass through the marble archway of the Iroquois Theatre. Women in heavy coats hold the hands of children. The mood is festive. It's the holiday season. And the matinee performance of Mr. Bluebeard is nearly sold out. You step inside, and the lobby opens into warmth and grandeur. Mahogany paneling, a wide staircase, the hum of anticipation. Nearly 2,000 people fill the seats. Many of them are mothers and children enjoying an afternoon away from the December chill. The curtain is about to rise on the second act. You find your seat in the upper balcony. The theater is beautiful and brand new. It opened just 5 weeks ago. You've heard it called fireproof. The word is printed in the programs, stamped into the public imagination. It is a promise. And within the hour, it will be broken. The Iroquois Theatre had been designed to be the crown jewel of Chicago's theater district. Its owners, led by theatrical producers Will J. Davis and Harry J. Powers, spared no expense on the building's ornamental beauty. It was modeled after the Opéra Comique in Paris, with a grand promenade foyer and an auditorium draped in velvet and gold leaf. Chicago, of all cities, understood fire. The Great Fire of 1871 had leveled much of the city and killed hundreds. In its aftermath, Chicago had rebuilt with ambition and caution in equal measure. Building codes were strengthened. Fire safety became a civic obsession. The Iroquois was supposed to represent the fulfillment of that promise, a theater that could not burn. But beneath the marble and the mahogany, corners had been cut. The theater had opened before it was truly finished. Fire escapes were incomplete or locked. Exit signs were absent or obscured. An asbestos safety curtain, required by code to separate the stage from the audience in an emergency, had been installed, but it was not made of asbestos. It was a substitute fabric, untested and fragile. The show that afternoon was Mr. Bluebeard, a lavish musical comedy imported from London's Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. It starred the beloved comedian Eddie Foy, one of the most famous performers in America. The production was enormous. Hundreds of cast and crew, elaborate scenery, and a dazzling array of electric and calcium arc lights suspended above the stage. The matinee audience that day was overwhelmingly women and children. Schools were on holiday break. Families had traveled from across the city and suburbs to see the show. Many had received tickets as Christmas gifts. The house was packed beyond its official capacity of 1,602. Estimates suggest as many as 200 people were standing. Partway through the second act, during a number called In the Pale Moonlight, a calcium arc light on the left side of the stage shorted or made contact with a muslin curtain. A small flame appeared, almost invisible at first in the blaze of stage light. Some in the audience noticed a faint orange glow near the top of the proscenium. Stagehands attempted to beat the fire out. A piece of burning fabric fell to the stage. The cast continued performing for a few uncertain moments, trying to keep the audience calm. Eddie Foy, sensing danger, walked to the front of the stage and urged people not to panic. His voice carried over the growing murmur of alarm. But the fire had already reached the scenery hanging in the fly gallery above. Painted canvas flats, stacked close together, soaked in oil-based paint. They ignited in rapid succession. Within moments, the flames were no longer a small problem. The entire stage was alight and sheets of fire rolled across the ceiling. The theater's safety curtain, the fireproof barrier meant to seal the stage from the audience, was lowered. but it snagged part way down on a wire used for an aerial act. It hung there jammed, a useless shield covering barely half the proscenium arch. Flames and superheated gas poured through the gap above it and into the auditorium. In the same critical moments, a backstage door was opened, likely by fleeing performers, and the winter air rushed in. The sudden influx of oxygen created a backdraft. A massive fireball exploded outward from the stage, over the heads of the orchestra section, and swept into the balconies with ferocious speed. Panic took hold instantly. Nearly 2,000 people surged toward the exits at once, but many of the doors opened inward, and the crush of bodies pressing forward made them impossible to pull open. Other doors were locked. Some accounts say they had been bolted to prevent people from sneaking into the show without tickets. Some exits led not to the street but to dead ends, unfinished fire escapes, bricked up passageways, and iron gates that were chained shut. In the balconies, the situation was worst of all. Patrons in the upper galleries found stairways jammed with fallen bodies. Darkness had swallowed the theater. The lights failed almost immediately after the fire spread. Those who did reach the alley behind the theater, a narrow passage now known as Couch Place, found a sheer drop from the upper floor emergency exits with no ladders or platforms below. Some jumped, others fell. Workers from a building across the alley laid planks and boards across the gap, creating makeshift bridges, and pulled survivors across one by one. The entire catastrophe, from the first spark to the last flame, lasted roughly 15 minutes. When firefighters entered the building, the fire was already dying. There was little left to burn. What they found inside defied comprehension. Bodies were stacked 6 and 7 deep at the exits, frozen in the posture of escape. Many of the dead showed no burns at all. They had been killed by superheated air and toxic gases, or had been crushed in the stampede. In the upper balcony, entire rows of seats held the bodies of people who appeared to be sitting upright, as though they had simply stopped breathing in an instant. The heat had reached them before they could even stand. The final death toll was 602 people. Over 200 of them were children. It remains the deadliest single-building fire in American history. Chicago was shattered. On the evening of December 30th, horse-drawn wagons carried the dead to temporary morgues set up in nearby restaurants, stores, and saloons along Randolph Street. Families wandered between the rows of bodies, searching for their loved ones. The city canceled its New Year's celebrations. Newspapers across the country carried the story on their front pages. The scale of the tragedy was almost incomprehensible. In a building that had been open for barely a month, in a city that had staked its identity on overcoming fire, grief turned quickly to fury. Investigations revealed a cascading failure of oversight. Building inspectors had approved the theater despite incomplete fire escapes and missing exit signs. The supposedly fireproof curtain was a sham. Ventilation skylights above the stage, designed to channel smoke upward and out, had been nailed shut. None of the theater's staff had been trained in emergency procedures. Will J. Davis, the theater's co-manager, was indicted on manslaughter charges. So was the building's fire inspector, and the mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison II. But in the end, not a single person was convicted. Legal proceedings dragged on for years, and every case was eventually dismissed or overturned on appeal. The absence of accountability only deepened the wound. For the families of the dead, the message was devastating. The systems that were supposed to protect their loved ones had failed before the fire. and had failed again after it. But the Iroquois fire did change things, profoundly and permanently. Within weeks, cities across the United States and Europe began passing new fire safety laws. Outward opening doors became mandatory in public buildings. Exit signs had to be clearly illuminated. Panic bars, the push open door hardware now found on virtually every public building, were developed directly in response to this disaster. Fire curtains were required to be genuine asbestos, regularly tested and unobstructed. Occupancy limits were enforced. Theaters were required to hold regular fire drills. Many of these regulations became the foundation for modern building codes, not just in America, but worldwide. The Iroquois Theatre was gutted, rebuilt, and reopened in 1904 under the name the Colonial Theatre. It later became the Oriental Theatre, and today it operates as the James M. Nederlander Theatre. Most of the people who pass through its doors have no idea what happened there. The building's past is not prominently marked. In Couch Place, the alley where so many fell or were rescued, there is no monument. A small plaque was installed in 2003, a century after the fire, on the initiative of local historians. It is easy to walk past without noticing. The Iroquois Theatre fire is not widely remembered today, not in the way that the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire or the Great Chicago Fire are remembered. And yet its death toll surpassed them both. 602 lives ended in 15 minutes in a building that was supposed to be safe. Every time you push open a door in a school, a theater, a shopping mall, every time a metal bar gives way under the weight of your hand and the door swings outward into the open air, that mechanism exists because of the people who could not get out of the Iroquois Theatre on a winter afternoon in 1903. Their names are largely forgotten, but the world they left behind was reshaped by their absence. The codes that protect us were written in grief, and the doors in every building in every city open outward now, because once they did not.